Okay, so up to this point, you should have your database connected. You should have the data imported and the .env file with your MongoDB URI. So now what we're going to do is in the root create a folder called config, and this is going to be responsible, or this file here is going to be responsible for connecting to the database. So let's call this, we'll call this file db, we'll just call it database.js. All right, now we have to install something called, install the MongoDB driver itself as well as Mongoose. So I'm going to go to another terminal here and let's npm install MongoDB and Mongoose. Okay, and then in this file we're going to import Mongoose from Mongoose, and let's initialize a variable here called connected, and we'll set that to false by default. Then we're going to create a function called connectDB. Okay, and this is going to be asynchronous, so we want to say async, because when we work with the Mongoose object, it's asynchronous. It returns a promise. Now, before we do anything to connect, there is a value we need to set for a strict query. So let's say mongoose dot, it's actually mongoose dot set, and then we're going to set strict, right here, strict query, set that to true. All right, then, and what that does is it just ensures that only the fields that are specified in our schema will be saved in our database. Now, let's say if the database, so if the database is already connected, don't connect again. Because the way this works, we're not creating like an express backend or anything like that. We're using Next.js API routes, which work in a similar way to serverless functions. Basically, we hit that function or we hit that API route, it runs a function, and it'll try to connect to the database and do whatever we want to do, fetch data, insert data, etc. So if it's already connected, then we don't want to connect again or try to connect again. So that's what we're testing here. So let's say if connected, then let's just do a console log and say MongoDB is already connected. And then we'll just return from the function. Okay, and then under that if statement is where we're going to connect to MongoDB. And we're going to put this in a try catch. Okay, and what we want to try is to await, because remember this is asynchronous, so we want to await on mongoose.connect, and we're going to pass in here our URI, which we can get with process.env.mongodb_URI. Then we want to set that connected value, we want to set that to true. Okay, and then we'll do a console log, and let's say MongoDB connected. And then in the catch here, all I'm going to do is a console log of the error. All right, then we just want to export that function so we can bring it in and use it in other places. So we're going to export it as default, connect DB, and that's it. That's our connection file. So very simple. Now we can test this out, and we could test it out in either an API route, which is where we'll be using this, or we could even test it out in a server component, which, our home page is. So let's just temporarily bring it in here just to test it out. So we'll import connectDB, and then let's just go in here and we'll say await connect DB. And we'll make this asynchronous so we can do that. All right. Now let's go to our console here, and you can already see it says MongoDB connected. So if I reload the page, it's going to first check to see if this connected is set to true. If it is, it'll say already connected. If not, then it'll connect. All right, and you can use this in any server component. However, the way we're constructing our application is basically by creating RESTful endpoints. So we're going to have API routes, and then in those routes, in those functions, is where we're going to connect to the database, not directly from the component. So we're going to get rid of that for now. I just wanted to make sure that the database actually works, that we can connect. All right, if you're getting issues, then it's probably something to do with either you have the wrong password or the wrong username, or your access, either your user or network access. So make sure that you have your IP address in there. You can also choose to allow from anywhere. So just mess around with those settings, and it should work. All right, so now that we can connect, in the next video, what we'll do is start to talk about API routes.